Welcome back. We are a day late, but not a dollar short. We did get the flu, and boy, was that an experience. I'm sure a lot of you have had it. It's going around, and it was an experience. Merry Christmas to us. But I was feeling a little better, and I did want to hop on here and record this week's episode because Happy New Year. I love this time of year. Everything is magical and anew, and it's a chance to do things better and set new goals and even turn over a new leaf if you want to. It's kind of odd, to be honest. You go to sleep one night in one year and you wake up the next day in a whole new year. It's almost like mini time travel. And this year we are time traveling to 2026. Unless you live in Ethiopia. If you live in Ethiopia, then on January 1st, 2026, it will only be the fourth month of their year in 2018. Welcome to the Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Terra Mama, where I tell you how they took what was once widely known about God, spirituality, and you, and how they took that and locked that away. Come with me while I show you what I've learned from science, religion, cultural beliefs, and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. So calendars are actually really tricky. Now, Ethiopia does have its own calendar, but they use the Gregorian calendar for all of their business purposes and diplomatic purposes and, many purposes in any official capacity. However, Ethiopia has kept time based off of their calculations of Jesus's Annunciation. And they're about 7 years behind us. Now, the Gregorian calendar was a correction to the originally in place Julian calendar, which, although it was in place for an incredibly long time, it created some seasonal drift over time. And the Gregorian calendar was thought to be more accurate. Just like the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar was widespread throughout the ancient world due to Roman conquest. And prior to that, everybody had their own calendars, and they could be solar, lunar, or lunisolar. In fact, the calendar as we know it, as of January 2026, will be only 444 years old. However, to put that into perspective of how young that calendar is, it replaced a calendar that ruled the Western world for 1,627 years prior to that. And the adjustment that they made was so minor that from now to 2099, the difference between the two calendars will only be 13 days. On the Gregorian calendar, today is December 29th. But on the Julian calendar, it's actually December 16th. Some Orthodox religions retain the Julian calendar for the timing of their religious holidays. Now, the Ethiopian New Year is actually in September on the 11th. Another calendar that brings its new year in September is the Hebrew calendar, which sees its new year on September 22nd. I'm not surprised by this connection. There's a rumor that the Queen of Sheba had a son with King Solomon, and he ruled Ethiopia. And there was a very strong Jewish and early Christian ties to the area. So, the Hebrew calendar is said to count from the beginning of creation, which makes today year 5786. Interestingly, this is right around when we start to see cultures that speak the reconstructed Proto-Semitic languages start to disintegrate into differentiated languages. And according to the Hebrew calendar, the day of creation was 6 days before their celebration of Rosh Hashanah, which is the beginning of the counting year, or otherwise known the Jewish New Year. The Coptic calendar was the primary calendar for Egypt up until they adopted the Gregorian calendar, which came later, I think in the 17 or 1800s. It's not dissimilar to the Ethiopian calendar in structure, and it was a correction to the original ancient Egyptian calendar, and it took more than 200 years for Egyptian priests to agree to adopt it, despite the fact that there was seasonal drift with the other calendar. Prior to this, the Coptic calendar occurred on the beginning of the Coptic calendar occurred on the first day of Thoth, which runs from September 11th to October 10th. So as you see, the world carried many calendars and even some different New Year's days. And of course, it really shouldn't surprise you because each culture would keep time as it needed to. Calendars were known for when to plant, when rains would come, when to keep sacred days, etc. They were very personable. They were for managing on a grand scale, not necessarily the day-to-day life. We depend on a daily calendar now. So, much like the Ethiopian and the Hebrew calendars, which keep important religious dates, Islam also has a calendar. It's used to keep the religious dates and dictate the celebration of the holidays in 24 different countries. In Islam, their New Year is in June. Now, different regions in the Indian Republic have had different New Year's days, depending on if it's using a lunar, a solar, or a lunisolar calendar. Some places have their New Year near Diwali, which occurs somewhere between October and November. In other places in India, New Year is actually in the March to April range of spring. Chinese New Year is called the Spring Festival, and it occurs somewhere between January and February. The Iranian Persian New Year usually coincides with the spring equinox as well. It usually occurs somewhere between March 19th and the 22nd. Honestly, even throughout Rome, New Year's Day has changed. In pre-Christian Europe, it was January 1st. And since Janus was the god of blessings, time, passages, transitions, and ending, the month of January was named for him. In post-Christian Europe, where the various religions and time periods, New Year has been celebrated on December 25th, March 1st, March 25th, which happens to be my birthday, and at some points in time it fell during the Easter holiday, which moves between March and April. So when we're talking about time, these time periods are still very, very recent. 444 years ago is a drop in the bucket. Even 2,000 years ago, practically yesterday. But when I'm looking for an answer, after I find a more recent explanation, my next go-to question is, well, what did they believe before? I feel like the further back we go, the more connected to our human roots we become, and the closer to what modern man believed we are, the closer to source we want to connect, okay, or we seem to be connected. So in this case, the major sweeping factor was Rome. So what was considered the New Year before Rome? About 4,000 years ago in Babylon, the New Year was during the Spring Festival, during the month of Nisan. Now, Nisan actually also occurs in the Hebrew calendar, but this is the Babylonian Nisan. And it occurs around the March equinox. As I mentioned before, the Coptic calendar was in place as a correction to an earlier Egyptian calendar. However, the New Year's Day didn't move. Ancient Egypt had the opening of the year festival, which occurred on September 11th. So here's another example of the year beginning in September. Now, interestingly, when you start to look at Celtic tradition, you find that Samhain, which eventually morphed into Halloween and All Saints' Day, was actually the beginning of the year. It's now what we consider to be Halloween, and before it was marking the transition from the lighter half of the year to the darker half of the year. It symbolized renewal, endings, and beginnings. And this is where the concept of the veil becoming thinner also originates, but it was the new year. When we look at American indigenous cultures, we see that most tribes have their new year aligned to, at, or near the winter solstice, which signified the rebirth of the sun and return of the light. So you'll see the new year itself holds no spiritual significance really at all. There's no magical time when the year is new because time is a man-made construct. It became important to count time to keep us organized. There's really no beginning or end. It's simply the passage of this current existence. So in some cultures, when all of the things around you spring to life, that's when they counted from. I'd always imagined that I go looking for the truth about counting the beginning of the year and find that all cultures had picked this time as the new year, and that it was changed to the dead of winter to confuse us or drive us away from nature. And although the oldest evidences that we do somehow have spring earmarked as the new year, in the way that it was targeted over time as well, it's really hard to fully know the truth. Maybe the year does begin anew in spring. However, when you look at cultures separated by time and distance, you'll find that it's just not that cut and dry. I imagine because spring can differentiate in timing by weeks at a time, it can come 6 weeks earlier, right? Based on how things bloom, that it probably wasn't an efficient way to mark the year once we needed to start marking years more specifically. In other cultures, it was around harvest time when they'd successfully prepared for the upcoming winter. In fact, it seems that many cultures, maybe even most, particularly those that developed from some of the most ancient roots, actually count their new year beginning somewhere between September and November. Is it possible that a shared cultural memory shaped this way of thinking? It definitely could be. I'd imagine it's equally not a good, reliable way to count time because it's an equinox. And if you base it on the harvest, it may come a little bit sooner or a little bit later. And then in many cultures, many cultures, including today, New Year's has been celebrated on, at, or near the winter solstice. In ancient times, it was on the winter solstice, which was historically celebrated about December 25th. And now we've moved it just a week later to January 1st. I can almost imagine the ancient celebrations of the return of the light, maybe some that go far back as Neolithic times. Likely the most ancient people counting time in how many solstices or winters they had survived. But thanks to the creation of time, New Year's has become a really magical and special time. Rather than a natural, energetic portal like the solstices or the equinoxes, like seasonal year markers, January 1st as New Year has become a man-made energy portal, an egregore of sorts, which essentially is a metaphysical being or existence created merely by the belief from the masses. It is one of the few times in the year that every place on Earth, on the planet, is celebrating the same thing at the same time. And most cultures use it to manifest new things and outcomes for the upcoming year, creating resolutions as to what the new year will bring or be for them. Although the places that have differentiated calendars have their own calendars, they still celebrate those personal New Year celebrations. They're still participating in the big planetary one that we have coming up. All the world over embraced December 31st to January 1st, that transition on the Gregorian calendar. And for many Americans, the party is not actually even the first to start. Our December 30th is in many places December 31st. So midnight will cascade around the planet for a full 24 hours. New Year's celebrations effectively last 3 Earth days, start to finish, and the world will be collectively manifesting for 72 hours straight. And by manifesting, I'm saying creating wishes that you hope will come true, that you can hold yourself to. New year, new you, right? It's actually a very powerful time. What if we were to leverage this time and use all that power to move the world to a better state? What if, while writing down or saying or burning or vision boarding your personal New Year's resolutions, what if we all added 1 or 2 for the collective world? Set your intention like you do with your personal goals and stick to it. Believe it will come true and embody it. My 2 collective world manifestation resolutions are that all people will have a personal interaction with the Most High Divine, and that after awakening their oneness with the Divine, will use that power to create a more peaceful, kind, giving, and authentic world, bringing us back into our original state of harmony and love, reigniting the divinity within humanity. I can tell you that after ringing in the new year, I'll be doing the following rituals. Spending time with the people that I love the most, baking delicious foods, performing self-care and self-pampering activities, face masks and fluffy slippers and soft, comfy clothes, eating great food, and my dinner on New Year's Day will be steak and shellfish, because that will usher in all the vibrations and intentions that I want for myself and my loved ones in 2026. Love, warmth, comfort, and prosperity. So what will your resolutions and rituals for yourself and the world be this year? I'll leave that for you to think about. Join me next week when we talk about Jesus the Christ and deities that do share commonalities with him. Until then, thank you for helping me take the occult and the apocalypse into just the hidden and the revealed. I will see you next week, and Happy New Year.